Hello and welcome to the Talk Football Podcast. This is season 4, episode 9. I am joined by Mr. Paul Nelson. It's morning for me, it's evening for him. Good evening, Paul.
Good evening or good morning.
Yes. Now,
You're up so early.
It is, I know, and I've only had 3 hours sleep. That's why my eyes look like a zombie from the apocalypse. So in this episode, we are doing something a bit different. So Monday night, and you can probably tell if you're watching on YouTube, the attire. It is Spurs versus Chelsea. It's a big game for many reasons, and we're going to cover those reasons. So yeah, we're going to preview the game. We're going to talk through the history of the fixture, why it means so much to the fans, and the bad blood and whatnot that can come with it, and get all of our thoughts on that. So we are going to start off, and Paul set the agenda on this one as well. He sent me a nice little text message and breaking it all down and where we're going to go with it. And I deliberated last night and write some stuff down. And yeah, we're going to see where we go. So first, we're going to talk about our confidence ahead of the fixture. And I'm going to start with you because I have none.
Oh, well, Chelsea's a funny game. You know, like being mid-40s like I am, growing up in the 90s in South London, I'm used to losing my pocket money, throughout the 90s at school as I bet confidently we would smash a team that we were superior to. And we never did, be it at home or away. And then, you go into, I can think of some of my worst moments have been Spurs Chelsea games. 2017 FA Cup semi-final. God, Son at left wing back.
Gonna cover that.
If we were playing anybody, if it was a top team in the country playing a team that's 14th, is that where you are at the moment?
We are probably not far off that, to be honest. But I think we're sitting around 10th or 11th at the moment.
Okay.
Obviously, there's fixtures that are coming up today. Might change that picture before we get to Monday night. Yeah, so I mean, we're currently sitting 11th. Obviously, Brentford leapfrogged us by smashing us yet again.
So any other team, I'd be confident of a victory, but something about Chelsea and the history of the fixture, something about Poch coming to the lane. In fact, I was listening to a podcast earlier, and the host told off one of the guests for saying Poch. It should be Mr. Pochettino.
Mr. Pochettino.
Poch is far too familiar. And I sort of agree. But yeah, that man in a hoodie, as he's now called on stuff, coming back to the lane, it leaves me with a little bit of trepidation, if I'm being honest.
It's a funny one for me because, like, if you'd have asked me this question, say 2 games ago, I may have come back with a bit more of had the results like against Brentford obviously gone the other way. I may have come back with a bit more confidence ahead of it. And we looked like we were sort of like going in a better direction. We'd got some wins, albeit, Luton, Fulham, whatever. But it appeared like, I mean, the football was better. We looked a bit more organised. We had players starting to trickle back. And then yet again, we come up against Brentford, and a Brentford team that weren't even at full strength. Still got obviously Ivan Toney missing, and we get smashed off the park. We had an early chance that again, same old story with us. We play some decent football early doors, we create a few chances, and we don't take them, and the team falls to the pot, which is why I'm so just have no confidence whatsoever going into this. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, if we look at relatively recent history, with the results, you ended an 8-game winless run, last February, which against us, which was when you beat us 2-0, and that was and according to the stats, he won. Where is it? Where we go? It was the first. If you beat us on Monday night, it'd be the first time since 2018 that you've done back-to-back victories against us.
That would have been the Wembley season, wouldn't it? 2018 was that?
2018. Yeah.
Yeah, that was when some ran past David Luiz, wasn't it?
Mm.
Yeah, we've got terrible, terrible, shocking results in this fixture. Even though it's got better in recent years, it's still terrible, which is why, yeah, I'm still filled with a lot of dread about this one, unfortunately.
Right. Well, so obviously, as we alluded to earlier, or a few minutes ago, even there is a bit of bad blood. So I've got like 3 pages of stuff that goes all the way back to like 1909 of where this sort of like started bubbling up and coming from. A lot of it will probably when it gets like later in, from like say mid 60s onwards, but a lot of it ties in with like football violence and stuff like that as well. So apologies to anyone that's offended by talk of that nature, but but it is part of it, unfortunately, in our histories. Even up to the relatively present day, we still have occurrences of uh, fan violence and whatnot and bad behaviour. So we are going to cover that. So if you are offended by that, I do apologise, but it is what it is. It's part of football. It's not a nice part of football, in my opinion, but we're going to cover it. So Paul don't know all the stuff I've got written down here. So as we go along, we'll kind of interlude and talk a bit some pieces about it. So initially, a lot of the rivalry, as Paul mentioned to me before we started, obviously goes back to the '67 Cup final. But it does actually go back a little bit before that. So we're going to cover some of that as well. So yeah, '67 Cup final and all that. But we go back to 1909. So it's a year after Spurs are formed in 1908, which I believe is correct. Um, so
1882.
yeah, but you entered the league.
Oh,
19,
yeah, that was
yeah,
right. It was formed in 82, but yeah,
that's
might have
it.
ended.
Yeah. So your first season in the old first division as it was. Um, and season comes down to a bit of slog out at the bottom actually between us. And then you actually beat us on one of our last games of the season, which actually sends us down.
Oh,
So,
really?
yeah, I know.
Ah,
So yeah. Where are we? I got it here. Yeah. So yeah, December 1909. We won the game 2-1 at the start of the season, more or less at the start of the season. But we both struggled towards throughout that whole season. And then you beat us 2-1, which relegated us. And what really probably stung more from the Chelsea perspective is there's actually a former Chelsea player that scored the winning goal, Percy Humphreys. So
oh.
so that straight away, so that's like obviously our granddad. They're the ones that would have been going, yeah, fuck, Spurs are the ones who got us relegated back then, son. So you make sure when you're growing up, Bosh, you have them. And then you obviously you come to so you bring that further forward. You come to '67. Obviously the FA Cup final. That was dubbed for some reason the Cockney Cup final, even though neither club is associated with Cockneys in East London. So strange one for me.
Narrative, isn't it?
Yeah, which obviously Spurs won 2-1. So yeah, again, another that's where more bitterness starts building from the Chelsea perspective. And then you come up a few, almost a decade up on that to 74-75 season. Yet again, both clubs in relegation trouble. Um, and then we're going into the second to last game of the season. So we still had 2 fixtures left, and you were a point above us. So we were a point above you. You're in the relegation zone. You beat us, drop us into the relegation zone. We don't pick any wins up in our last 2 games and get relegated again.
Well, I'm pleased to see that at least Spurs are doing the better at the beginning of the rivalry. It's going to
It,
turn in
would,
a minute.
it pretty much continued that way, more or less, because obviously you went on your sort of like your trophy spree around that time,
Oh,
like
yeah,
you got like the Bill
yeah.
Nicholson era, etc. That kind of thing. Multiple FA Cup sort of like appearances, etc. pretty much all the way through until we get to the 90s, which is obviously the era that we grew up in. So
I
both of us are born in
remember not
78.
very fondly.
Yeah. And that's kind of where, even before the money, that's kind of where Chelsea's dominance of the fixture, albeit like pickpocketed along the way with one or two results. But that is like, obviously, that's where Chelsea started becoming good. And we did have a bit of money coming into the club around that sort of time anyway. Ken Bates had already started bringing in some of the foreign
Matthew
players.
Harding, wasn't it? Yeah.
Yeah,
Ben
Matthew
Harding.
Harding injected quite a bit of money into the club, which meant what we could bring in. Obviously, a few more of the foreign players that started to really sort of like change the whole ethos at Chelsea in terms of what was expected. And then of course you had the Roman Abramovich era. Now I had this little thing. I don't know if this is true. I don't know if you ever heard this. That Roman Abramovich flat out refused, in terms of transfer wise or other, flat out refused to do any kind of business with Spurs. That's something I weren't aware of, but apparently that's
I
true.
think Carlo Cudicini would have moved during his time, but other than
Mm,
that, that might be correct. And that might have something to do with the fact that I think at one point he was targeting, he wanted to buy Spurs, I think. And the
mm.
story is I think he was in a helicopter and he was flying over London and he flew over Tottenham. And of course, Tottenham isn't Chelsea is. And
No,
I think he decided, actually, I'd rather put my money in the kind of
in
in
West
Fulham as
rather than
opposed to
North.
Chelsea, in West London as opposed to North London. Yeah.
Mm. I mean, obviously, throughout obviously that period, the 90s, we had a special nickname for White Hart Lane.
I remember. Yeah.
Yeah, 3 Point Lane. But you did have obviously a few good results against us. But predominantly that 67, I'll go back to that 67 fixture. That's when the trouble, the real sort of like trouble between the fans.
Yeah.
So that was one of the highest attended FA Cup final for 67. There was over 100,000 people there. And before the game, both sets of fans invaded the pitch, and it erupted into a massive battle. So obviously the game being delayed and whatnot, and then obviously you went on to win anyway. But yeah, so that's kind of like the first sort of real aspects of like the violent side, if you like, of stuff that started happening between the fans, and you bring that right up to sort of like you got the 2015 League Cup final, and there was trouble before and after the game with that one, unfortunately. And then of course you've got the Willian situation, which
Of
yeah, again,
course. Yeah.
that did stir up a bit of blood, bad blood between the fans as well, and there was a bit of niggle, and you can also take that forward to the fixture, which they dubbed the Battle of the Bridge, which obviously ridiculous
Uh,
amount of yellow cards. Musa Dembele, I think he ended up getting a 6-game ban on that one
yeah.
as
For
well for
gorging out.
gouging. Yeah,
Yeah.
Diego Costas. But obviously Willian in that game in particular really took some treatment. I think him and Danny Rose were like just at it constantly in that game.
We lost our heads in that game, but I remember I lost my head as well. I was watching it, just like fuck the result, just kick the shit out of them. Like, yeah, that's all I was bothered about. Like,
Yeah, I think for me, because I don't know. I mean, maybe I'm just not a normal Chelsea fan, but I've never really like had a hatred towards Spurs on
you're
a
not a normal
person.
person, I
But
don't think.
I've always obviously been aware of the historic nature of it, like not so that as much as in depth as obviously I've researched it going all the way back to where it did, because I think it's difficult obviously if you've not experienced any and of that. And the only time I've really experienced firsthand where it was nasty was actually after a game, and I hadn't actually been at the game. I just happened to be in the Fulham area and going through Fulham Broadway tube station at the time when all the fans were coming out and it was kicking off. And it actually kicked off down in the tube station. So for me, that was like my first-hand experience of like, all right, okay, so this is not all bravado. Then there is real hatred still there between certain sections. But yeah, so and then you had that, and then I mean, that the game, obviously, the 2-2 match as well. Looking at that one, and obviously that's the one that cost you the title. So I
Well,
suppose
I'm
they
I'm
say,
gonna
I mean, people
I'm
say that about
disagreeing with that narrative. It didn't.
it.
We
Didn't,
were
no.
There was never really a title race. We were always so far behind Leicester, and the way that the TV stations decided to set the fixtures meant that we were always chasing them. If you look back on that season, I know it sounds like a bit of sour grapes, but there was the whole like the media desperately wanted Leicester to win the title, so they never allowed it to become a title race. I
Yeah,
think in the running, Spurs played before Leicester twice of like the last 12 or 13, 14 games. Other than that, it was Leicester extending the lead.
always
We
chasing.
never allowed it to become a race because it never got to the point where we were like 2 points behind or a point behind or
Mm.
a point in front or whatever. So it was never a race really. But yeah, that was when
So in,
mathematically,
I mean,
yeah,
there's like three occasions in sort of like Premier League history wise that like Chelsea fans, obviously, you had the season we won the league, 2017. So that was quite a sort of like a you were I think you actually came second that year,
yeah, and you beat
eighty
us in
six
the
points.
semi-final of the FA
Yeah.
Cup.
So so we had that. You
Yeah.
had the 93 point season for us, which at the time obviously, was a record season for points wise uh for a club. So that was and that would have been under Jose's second time around. I think, or it could have been actually
Conte,
no.
wasn't
It was
it? I
no,
think it
no,
was.
Ancelotti. Could have been Ancelotti.
Well,
Was it
I'll
Conte?
bow to
One of the
you.
two. No, no, you're right. Yeah, no, yeah, it would have been Conte. It's early. But yeah, so yeah, that, and then obviously it comes right up until where we are. Um, in this, in these last couple of seasons, where I think we were. I think it was your first game at Wembley, in your little stint away from White Hart Lane. We beat you. And in the first fixture between the two at the new Tottenham Stadium, we beat you as well. So I suppose Chelsea fans, we're trying to like balance the levels of history. So you got us relegated twice, and we're effectively going to claim that we stopped you winning the league twice. One by winning it once ourselves, and the other by getting the draw and letting Leicester win it. We know that factually that's not quite accurate because obviously there's far more games that were involved. But yeah, so that sort of sets the bad blood between the two. So it goes, way back, like well over 100 years, where bad feeling between the two clubs. And in terms of like obviously rivalries, all right, geographically, other than it being London, you're not our closest rivals, but we see you that way. Um, Obviously you don't because your closest rivals and your biggest rivals and derbies obviously would be Arsenal, North London derby, and all that. But for us, Chelsea fans, obviously Spurs is the big one, which is why so many of us dreading Monday night.
Well, I hope come Tuesday morning you're as equally as dreaded and upset of it.
Well,
Fingers.
yeah. I mean, one other thing just to touch on, just before was obviously another bit that set a bit of bad blood even, was obviously when Conte was your manager, and we had Thomas Tuchel, and he had the famous handshake.
Oh, of course, yeah.
So
That's it. That's a long
and
time
that's
ago.
obviously
It's
what
only been a season.
it feels like ages ago because we've been through so many managers since. But yeah, it's that was only 2022, and obviously, and that's that same season where Tuchel goes, Potter comes in,
Mm.
then Frank, and now where we are, which is an absolute pile of shite. So yeah, there we go. So that sets it. So now, obviously, it brings us on to Monday night's fixture. And I've got a little thing here. So I've got like both of our teams, sort of like by numbers, if you like, so far this season. And we're going to start with you because obviously your start's been massively impressive, which is just, and there's a few key reasons why. I know you were skeptical, and we spoke about this on the last episode about obviously taking the title and winning it, but generally, obviously the stats so far by what you've done sit in your favour. So I'll go through these and then we'll get your take on it. So Spurs season by numbers: 26 points from the opening 10 is the best start. Um, yeah, since blah 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 blah. I can't even know what that word is. I've written down there. It's too early.
Let's start for a new manager coming
Yeah,
in.
yeah. So yeah, 12. So it's your best start, obviously, since 60 to 61 season, which she went on to win a title. Um, 6 of the last 12 teams that have amassed that amount of points have gone on to win the title, and then 4 of which went on to become runners up. Yeah, obviously, if Ange avoids defeat in Monday night's game, it'll be only the second manager to do so in their opening 11, which is yet again is incredible. Yeah, and it'll be the first time since Pochettino in 2018 that you would have won 5 games in a row.
Wow.
Yeah, I don't know if you knew that one, if you were
I
aware
didn't
of that
know
one.
that one. No.
No, so that's you by numbers. And we'll do Chelsea's after we get what you think about that.
Well, I mean, it's a phenomenal start, isn't it? Like, I was expecting the hiccup. I thought we'd be sitting where Chelsea are in 11th. You know, a few defeats, a few draws, a couple of wins, looking relatively positive even in the games that we lose. Being able to see some kind of pattern of play, some kind of vision, something to hold on to the future, but not seeing it in the results because he's only just come in. He's got a brand new squad and it's too early. So the fact that they've all taken it on board and they, you know, we seem to be playing amazingly, and Eve reckons it can only get better. Eve reckons we're not attacking particularly well. We seem to be defending pretty good. So yeah, phenomenal. Just enjoying being top of the league, but I don't expect it to last. You know, certainly when you're looking at it from a title perspective, you talk all them stats about 6 teams won it from this position and 4 came second and all that,
Yeah.
but most of them wouldn't have had City, would they? Wouldn't have had
No,
that
City,
juggernaut.
Liverpool, Arsenal.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a lot of teams obviously chasing it. I think obviously I think, to be honest, like after City, Liverpool, and Arsenal, I think that there's a massive then drop off in quality in terms of the rest of the league. Albeit Newcastle, I'd tip
Yeah.
Newcastle for being, and Newcastle are really kicking into gear, but I still think they'll, squad wise, they'll probably fall a little bit short. But I do think that they will be in the top 4.
Yeah. The positive for Spurs is I would say it's going to take something not to get into the Champions League now.
Yeah, yeah.
But the negative for me on that would be the League Cup defeat and how the focus is on the focus can't continue to be just being in the Champions League and that being enough. You have to have the ambition to win the league or to try and win the Champions League. And also to try and win the FA Cup and the League Cup. Because if all you want to do is finish 3rd or 4th, Arsenal found out, and we found out this season. If your aim is to finish 3rd or 4th, you'll spend your time finishing 5th and 6th because other teams will have a greater ambition than what you've got. So my fear is, say January, say we're sitting 2nd or 3rd and we're 6 points off the top, so within a mathematical chance and an actual decent chance of having a title charge and potentially winning it. Levy will look at that and say to himself, well, we're qualified for the Champions League. I don't need to invest.
I need to spend.
Whereas a club with the ambition would go, oh, actually, Son's off at the Asia Cup. Let's get a striker in on the 2nd of Jan. So we've got someone. And if Van der Ven or Romero get injured, then we're stuffed at centre half. Let's get ourselves a top quality centre half as backup.
Yes. Yeah.
But I don't. If the chairman changes his ways, then we might stand a chance. But until then, probably not. But amazing start. I'm enjoying it at the moment and not worrying about what comes in the future. Just taking each game, game by game, and enjoying the victories.
Well, I mean, the contrast obviously between our 2 fortunes is staggering, and Chelsea by numbers just reads relegation. But that won't happen. We'll have enough. We'll do enough, and we'll get enough. But just, I mean, when I really look at it and really look at how bad it is, it's just to go from where we were, um, and obviously you had the whole thing with Roman and having to sell the club, and all of a sudden it goes. It's a phenomenal drop off by a team that's been, a club that's been winning trophies consistently for 20 years. And even if not winning trophies every season, more or less, with the odd little blip here and there, competing. Because I think that's the thing. As long as you feel as a club that you're competing and that you've got a chance of something, when you have seasons here and there where things don't quite happen, you might have you might finish sixth, but you might pick up, like I said, might pick up an FA Cup or a League Cup, or you might, like we've done on a couple of occasions, win the Champions League. It's you take that, but to stay at that real elite table, and you can never afford to drop off too far, because as you've seen with like the likes of United and all that, the climb back is just massive. And looking at our numbers, so 15 defeats in the calendar year so far. So 15 defeats in 2023 is only one letter. So if we get beaten by you, we would have equaled the same amount of defeats that we did in calendar years 21 and 22 combined. So that's in 1 year.
Yeah.
Honestly,
There's
and
still a few games to go this season.
I know. So like, so
This
this is why obviously we look at fixtures like this and we just think, oh, gee, we don't need this. That's the most in a year for us since 1994. And that was ironically a year that we'd got to a cup final anyway against Man United and got smashed 4-0 in the final. Only Bournemouth and Everton have a worse record.
Wow.
So and one of them in within those that 3-year period had been relegated in Bournemouth, and Everton obviously always tippy-toeing around the edge of that relegation. It's crazy, right? So since Graham Potter left, we've only won 8 games in 39. That is just that's crazy. So that's obviously spread out. That's obviously spread over. Yeah. So that's obviously spread over, and those wins have been Bournemouth, Palace, and then obviously a couple of wins that we've had this season. It's just we've only won 5. Sorry, we've been defeated in 5 in 7 London derbies. Our last 7 London derbies, we've lost 5.
I'm starting to get too confident now.
You can see where I have none. So that brings us to Monday night's fixture. And we'll cover sort of like Poch after the what we go through the team news, and then we'll talk about Poch or Mr. Pochettino, and then we'll do our final like predictions for the game. So in terms of team news, your team, your squad's looking pretty all right. I mean, according to what I read anyway, you've only really got Perisic, Sessegnon, and Solomon out. Other than that, you've pretty much got a full squad to choose from.
I think we've got a problem at left back for this game. So
I think the doggy, he's going to face a late fitness test.
Yeah,
But I
and
think they're expecting.
Davies is out.
Yeah, I think they're expecting him to make it though.
I hope so, because if Davies is out, and I think he was injured for our previous game, he'd taken off at half time. He didn't look brilliant. Then it would have to be moving Emerson from right. He's obviously right back, and then putting him on the left side.
Yeah.
So that would weaken us severely if he's not fit. But other than that, hopefully it will just be the same old.
I suppose it would depend who we would go with if all fit. Who we would go with in the forward areas, whether he decides to bring. Personally, I think if he plays Johnson against us, I think you tear us a new one. I don't think our defence can possibly cope with that kind of pace.
Yeah, I'd like to think he does play Johnson. That would be my hope. Again, he's looked good every time he's come on. He played him. His first start was the North London derby. So
yeah,
and then he got injured, unfortunately. But yeah, I think he plays in. You got him, Son, and then
Sonny through the middle.
Kulusevski on the other side, and then Richarlison can come on at the end and
Yeah.
run around. Hopefully, that'll do the job.
In terms for us, we have got a few positives. Obviously, Reece James came back and played some minutes in the League Cup during the week, along with Benoit Badiashile, who I do think will be probably our one of our better centre half options going forward. I think he's a class player, but obviously they had limited minutes, and obviously James came off as a bit of a precaution, just because you don't want to aggravate a recently healed injury. And obviously James is, albeit our club captain now, his injury record's not great. So, but it's nice obviously having them two back. Other than that, we've still got Chukwuemeka out, Chilwell out, Fofana out, Lavia out. I mean, Lavia we paid 50 odd million for from Southampton. He's not kicked the ball yet. And Nkunku still out. I mean, we're hoping to get him back by Christmas, but obviously nowhere near in terms of this fixture. So, yeah.
Does Pochettino still play the same way he did at Spurs, with like the fullbacks go wide, the anchor midfielder drops in to almost make like a free centre half at the back, and the fullbacks
No,
effectively play as wing backs?
I think he would like to play that way if he had a full front line to kind of pick from. And obviously he's had literally more or less since the start of the season, he's had Reece James and Ben Chilwell missing. So you could do that if you had Chilwell and James in the team, and then like you had like a front four, if you like, which would be a similar kind of setup like the way he had it with Spurs. We'd have like your focal point. Obviously at the time it would have been obviously Kane, which for us would be either Jackson or Broja, and then you have your wingers either side. For me, that would probably be Mudryk and Sterling, and then you'd normally then would have Nkunku as that floating 10, that playmaker from breaking from the midfield areas. And then you'd have like Caicedo and Enzo holding that midfield. So yeah, you could have Caicedo would be the one that would probably drop a bit deeper, allowing Reece James to float in off the right to create the extra man in midfield. And then Ben Chilwell on the left, stretching the play on that side.
Yeah, I just wondered tactically, because Spurs,
Yeah,
our fullbacks are inverted, so they come into midfield to create a box in the centre of midfield.
yeah,
And then if Chelsea continue to play with that wide, then in theory, the way to get at Spurs is width, because
yes,
we play very narrow. We
very
want to
narrow.
control the ball in the middle, as many men in the middle as possible. And we don't really play wide at all because the fullbacks invert.
Yeah,
So I just thought it'd be interesting tactically if our fullbacks invert, your fullbacks bomb. And it's like
yeah.
a game of chicken, isn't it?
I mean,
Who's gonna stick to the system?
the problem is obviously if he doesn't start Reece, then he's either going to start. If he goes with a back four, he's likely to probably start with Colwill, who's a centre half but can play left back. I think he'd probably be likely that he'll start him over Cucurella. And then on the so Colwill will go in there. Then you'd probably be looking at Thiago Silva will play in the centre half. I'm not sure if he'll bring Badiashile back that early. I mean, you could go with Cucurella at left back and then play Colwill alongside Thiago Silva. I would prefer it at right back if he went with Gusto instead of playing Disasi, because yet again, Disasi, albeit he can play as a right back, he is a centre half. So it's square pegs round holes kind of thing, and which is kind of where our season's been all season, because with so many injuries, like at one point, like 13 first team players out injured, you just can't get any kind of like familiarity at patterns of play. And it's so disruptive to where our whole season's been, which has been why the league results are so up and down. Like when we play good football, and when we've got the likes of Mudryk, who's super quick, starting to find a bit of confidence, but keeps getting niggly little injuries, so that sets him back. Madueke, for us, a lot of Chelsea fans would like to see Madueke in the team, but because we were giving Sterling so much stick, particularly like for last season, first sort of early part of the season. Then all of a sudden, Sterling went on fire and he's been on pretty good form. So that's not enabled Madueke to get minutes and into the team. So you've got two young players in Mudryk and Madueke that could really stretch teams. But now we've got a confidence crisis with our strikers. So at the start of like before the season, we bought in Jackson. He was a bit of an unknown quantity. Pre-season, absolutely flying, but he had the support of a fully fit Mudryk, Madueke, and Kunku, and all that. Sterling, all constantly feeding him, so he was able to make the runs in the channels. He was getting lots of chances, he was putting goals away. Premier League, different ball game. Don't get the time, don't get the space. You're going to get kicked up in the air by the defenders, and then because you're not getting that, because of so many injuries, you're not building any kind of familiarity. So he's not really sure if a ball's going to come. Always different midfielders, different fullbacks. You've got Reece James and Ben Chilwell on a pitch. You've got balls are going to be coming in the box constantly. Midfielders will have space to do what they do, but none of that's there. So it's like we haven't got a goal scorer who can score goals. I think he's like one in. I think he's only got one Premier League goal since the start of the season. He's got a couple in cup competitions, etc. Broja's only fresh back from injury. I think Broja's a talent. There's no doubt. We saw what he can do in the Premier League when he was on loan at Southampton. But yet again, the fitness issues with him, he can't stay fit either. If this fixture had been 2 months down the line, towards maybe the back end of January, and maybe we'd got someone in, a goal scorer in, even if it was a loan, I might feel a bit more confident with it. But I struggle to see, looking at tactical wise and looking at your setup, I struggle to see where we hurt you.
Okay.
Yeah, I really do, because albeit, all right, if your doggy don't make the match, maybe Sterling off of that right hand side on Madueke can hurt you a bit. That's a big maybe. On the opposite side of the pitch, if Mudryk does start, and it's unlikely, I think he starts, because obviously, he's only just back, so I think that's unlikely there. So the chart, what you would probably look at would be Sterling will probably start left, Madueke will start right, and see again. I don't see where we get in behind you, and our midfield three is probably likely to be Caicedo, Gallagher, and Enzo. So I'm struggling where we have the creativity in there, someone who's going to play the passes to get in behind the likes of Van der Ven and whoever plays alongside him. I know it's really pessimistic, and I should be more positive and say, this is the game that's going to turn our season and all that. But I just really struggle with it. I just don't see it.
Okay, so before we then go on to Pochettino's reaction
Reception. Yeah.
and the reception, what's his standing like at the moment amongst Chelsea supporters?
Do you know what? It's a lot of fans are fairly realistic with it, and we're like, he's not got a full deck of cards to play with. You've got to give him time. We have seen pockets of really good play, and where we have looked really good. The goalkeeping issue, Kepa's pulling up trees in Madrid. They're talking about signing. They want to sign him permanently, and he may even end up replacing Courtois. He's been that good for Madrid. So our number one keeper is having a stormer in Madrid, and we've got Brighton's third choice goalkeeper in goal in Robert Sanchez. And then we bring in this young lad, Jordi Petrovic, from the MLS, and he hasn't kicked a ball. He didn't even play him in the Carabao Cup, so we don't even know what he's about, what he can do. So there's a problem. So it's difficult to judge Poch, but I tell you what, it's on the knife edge. I almost think it's getting towards a stage where it's like 50-50, and fans are really going, do you know what? We know what he can possibly do as a Premier League manager, but we ain't having this. And you're off, mate. And I think obviously if the fans turn in a massive way, then, which could happen after Monday night, but
Monday, if everything goes the way I want it to, yeah.
yeah, but in a weird way, if by some sort of miracle of the footballing gods, we pull off a result or even just avoid defeat on Monday night, it probably buys him grace for another a month or so in terms of like real fan pressure. I don't necessarily think Todd Bowie is and the team that are running Chelsea now I don't necessarily think they give much of a hoot about what we think as fans. They're businessmen and they'll make a business decision. Um, I think so. I would think that they probably realistically they would look at it and go, right, we need to see what this guy is going to do with the team once he gets his players back, and maybe we can add one or two in January. And you would think from a business point of view, sacking another manager. I mean, if I read it right, Potter's sacking cost us something in the region of 10 to 13 million quid to pay up his contract, etc., and get him to go. And I would imagine Pochettino's probably on more money than Potter was. So you're looking at another sizable chunk, and of course, that money eats into your FFP as well. So and we have spent a considerable amount of money, albeit we brought a lot of money in terms
Just
of
to
like
get it.
transfers, but you're talking 26 million potentially, whatever on you lose on managers and whatever you're paying the new guy. That eats into a potential budget, maybe to bring it forward in January if you sack him.
Yeah.
Me personally, I say give him time. I think that once he gets, particularly in Kunku, because I honestly think that's the player that knits it all together. Because he's such a clever player. He's the one that can break defenses. He floats in that pocket between centre halves and central defensive midfielders, and I think he just brings the team to life. I know that's a lot to pin on one player, but you need a catalyst player. And for you guys, obviously for this season, for me, for you, looking from an outside perspective, that player's been Maddison. I think he's been phenomenal. And there's a lot of similarities in play between what Nkunku can do and what Maddison does. And yeah, that just that spark of creativity. And we just don't have that. Yeah. So I think it's difficult to judge him at this time because it's just ridiculous amount of players missing. In terms of his reception, what he gets at the new Tottenham Stadium, I don't know. I would like to think he'll get a good reception from the Spurs fans for what he did, but I don't know. What's your feeling?
I think he will. To be honest, I think that it will be mixed. There will be some
Yeah, I
people
mean,
that will
there's going to
boo,
be boos
and
because that's football. It's what people do.
yeah,
You know.
and we've got us. We have a song about loving Big Ange instead, so that will be sung a bit, I'm sure, but that will be more
Yeah,
in support
I'm honestly,
of
mate.
Ange.
I'm getting quite sick of hearing Dolly Parton and Robbie Williams. I really someone
So
someone needs to smash you a couple of times. Stop all that nonsense.
I think the best reception is no reception at all. Just kind of like
Take the focus away from that and keep it on the football.
it's 3 points for us, or trying to get 3 points for us. It's a game.
Yeah,
I think it would have been entirely different. Like, imagine the narrative if as Chelsea were flying and Spurs were in 11th, and then it would have been, why didn't you pick the phone up? Why didn't you get this man back? You knew he could do it, etc., etc. So it's very rare for me to
which
give the
is where I
chairman.
predicted you'd be.
Yeah, it's very rare for me to give the chairman any form of credit at all. But I'm assuming that he saw what Ange was doing up at Celtic and what he's done previously. He saw the kind of the personable manner that he has, which would take the pressure off the chairman, who doesn't have
Yeah,
a personable manner in the slightest, and thought that it was better to kind of start again than go back. And 10 games in is correct.
yeah. Well, I mean, I
Yeah.
think that's the thing. I think that's the thing that probably needles us more than anything is that you can't hate him. You can't hate Ange Postecoglou. As you could, because he's so chilled and like laid back, and I can imagine that actually in the dressing room. Apparently he doesn't go in the dressing room much. Apparently he says that's the players' area. I do what I've got to do, but generally, the dressing room is where they are.
I think the
And
success of it is not running the club on fear. Like the last two main managers,
yeah,
Conte and Mourinho, obviously ex-Chelsea, um, ran it on fear, didn't they? They were like, "I know
yeah,
what I'm doing. I'm the man.
my
You either
way,
follow or you disappear."
yeah,
And it was, and both of them actually, but particularly Mourinho. If a player made a mistake, he would throw him under the bus. It
big time,
wasn't, it
yeah,
wasn't, it wasn't his fault. Whereas Ange just said, like, we're playing out from the back. This is the way we're doing it. You give the ball away, it leads to a goal. We lose the game. It's on me. I've
yeah.
told you to do it.
That's what
Where
I've told
this,
you. I think
yeah,
I think from looking from an outside perspective, if you'd have gone back obviously before Ange, and you took Kane out of that, you'd be looking at that going, all right, where are the leaders? Where are the players that are going to take the armband and lead the team? Now I look at Spurs and I see multiple leaders on the pitch, and I think that comes from the manager installing a sense of responsibility on the team to
yeah,
sort
I
itself.
agree.
So
Yeah,
you have a captain, and Sonny's a great sort of like lead by example captain because he runs his
yeah,
nuts off, um, you know, and there just seems to be a real enjoyment in your squad. There's a you can clearly see that there's just like a massive bond between the players. Um, and I watched the Madison interview when they spoke to Madison about like why he picked Spurs when there was other clubs in for him and that, and he said it came down to Ange, and really he said obviously Spurs are a massive club, blah blah blah, and all this, and it's the club history part, but like he goes the conversation I had with Ange, he was like, listen, this is where I see you fitting in, this is what I think you can do.
yeah,
He goes, but we're going to change things at Spurs, and these
yeah,
things are going to happen even if you don't come. We're still going to do this and go there, and it's completely, it's like up to you if you want to be a part of that. I'll see you as part of it. And then like
yeah.
obviously Madison's like he's got away. He's like, oh, I really want to work for this guy. So and that's it. I think, and if you have that, you have that kind of thing where people go right, and I think Poch has that to a
He
degree.
does. Yeah, he does. He does. It
Yeah,
probably doesn't come through as much because to the media or to us because English is his second language.
yeah,
And when he talks to the media, he does try to hide behind the fact that English isn't his first language. So
yeah,
he'll try to misinterpret. He'll purposely misinterpret a question or not answer a question, and he gets away with it because English isn't his first language.
well, I
Whereas
mean,
with media, Angie's approach is the complete opposite. It's like I understand the question, I'll choose whether I answer it or I'll answer it in my way, but I'll be quite clear and honest and insightful with my answer.
yeah,
I'm not just going to dismiss it. I might not give you the answer you want, but I'll give you an answer because obviously you can't hide behind the fact
yeah.
of the language barrier.
Well, I mean, Poch has pissed a lot of Chelsea fans off. So we had the press conference on Friday,
Yeah,
and he thinks that you're great. He thinks that you're probably going to win the league, and he loves the club. And we're like, I'm sitting there like, I mean, I was like, I wasn't watching it live, but I was watching it back, and I'm thinking, yeah, you really, really should be shutting up now. You're like, come on, mate, don't like,
yeah, that does seem a bit stupid. But then he does
yeah,
he stupid things like, he's talked about when he was at Espanyol, he's an Espanyol man, he won't go to Barcelona. And he talked about at Tottenham about how, Arsenal weren't actually our rivals, Chelsea were our rivals. Um, so under that context,
yeah, and then
and he was the manager of the Battle of the Bridge game for fuck's sake. It should
yeah.
never have been.
I mean, he claimed that he never ever said that he'd never managed Chelsea. He only ever said that he'd never managed Barcelona and Arsenal. But
I
I'm
think technically
sure.
that's true. But he
I don't,
said Chelsea are Tottenham's biggest rivals. He's clearly stated that, because that
yeah,
was at the time,
I,
going for the title and you stopping us and winning it, all of that narrative. So he knew, he knew.
yeah,
But it's a difficult one. Tottenham didn't pick the phone up. Tottenham didn't want him. He lives in London. He obviously likes London. He wants to work. It was probably the best option.
yeah,
It's a tough one, but I think he'll get a decent reception, a mixed reception. but good. Good before, good after, but probably have to put up with a
But
little.
during you get a bit, yeah. Which you expect in football. You know, that's the way it is. Right. So before we wrap up, we're going to get onto the dreaded predictions. Not for the season. We covered that in the last episode, but just for this game. I'm going to let you go first because I know where I'm going with mine. I'll
I'm
imagine
gonna
you should feel confident.
I'm I'm gonna forget. I'm not gonna play the club. I'm gonna play the team and play the current situation. So I'm gonna go 2-0 because I keep in the kind of Kiwi Spurs supporters Facebook group. I always put a goal in. I always go like 2-1 or 3-1 because I don't for some reason I don't have any faith in the defense. But then that's ridiculous because we're actually defending brilliantly. So this
Yeah.
time I'm going to have faith in our defense, mainly because you also struggle to score. So I'm going to go with a 2-0. And I'm going to say it's going to be a tight first half.
Yeah.
And we might break the deadlock just before the end of the first half or beginning of the second half. And then as you come out, we'll get a second. That's my thinking.
I'm going to go with type on our current way we play. I think the first 20 minutes, I expect us to relatively dominate the ball in terms of possession. I expect us to create one or two chances. I don't expect us to take them, which would then give your players even more confidence to think these ain't going to hurt us. I think you'll allow us to have that ball, and then I think you break on us. And I think once you get the goal, I'm hoping it's not, you know, too early in the first half. I hope we can hold you off for 30 odd minutes or so, or hopefully get it to half time level. But I do think that once you get the goal, I think the confidence goes again completely. Um, I'm and I apologise, Chelsea fans. I know you probably won't want to hear this. I'm going one more. I'm going 3-0 Spurs. I do. We're just not in the place for it. We really ain't. I just look at all around your pitch, and even from set pieces, you know, your centre halves coming up and stuff. I just see you hurting us. No faith in my goalkeeper. Um, you know, our best player is nearly 40 years old, and and I can't see Thiago Silva doing a one man blocking wall against Kulusevski, Son, Johnson, or Richarlison, and with Madison pocket in the space in behind that, I don't think he gets tracked. I think Madison has a field day in this game, and I think he just rips us apart. I dread every time you'll get a set piece because we're shite from set pieces.
Mm.
So yeah, I'm going
You had
3-0.
Chelsea victory.
I honestly, I just think being where it is as well. I just not that we're any particularly better at the bridge, but yeah, I just don't. I just don't see us getting anything out of this game. If we do, it could potentially be a platform for the rest of the season to push on. I just don't see it. I don't see it, and I think I don't actually think a defeat in this game in particular puts any more pressure on Poch in terms of whether or not he would, you know, the board might make a decision or not. I don't think that happens with this. I think if you just isolate this as like a one-off game, I don't necessarily think that changes anything. And probably the board probably relatively expects us to get beat as well. So, you know, if they were thinking about making a decision, it would have been made before this game anyway. So yeah, that's where I am with it. I know you talked about having a bet, but I'm not, I'm not even considering or entertaining that prospect. Yeah,
Wow.
I might as well just open up my wallet and throw it all down the drain. But
Well,
yeah,
let's roll on Monday night, Tuesday morning for me, and
yeah, and
yeah,
obviously it's a you getting up for I mean, I suppose actually being a Monday night game, it's maybe not so bad for you because obviously you can get up at well, so it'd be what 9 o'clock in
I'm
the
meant to,
nine
nine
o'clock in the
o'clock in the
morning.
morning, but I'm meant to be working, aren't I? So
Yeah. I can't work, Gov. But yeah, so it is where it is. it is where it is. We are where we are. I'm not looking forward to it at all. We struggled against Blackburn, for Christ's sake. We won 2-0, but in the cup game, and he pretty much played more or less a full strength team, and we struggled in that. Blackburn could have scored 3 or 4 goals if they had better finishers. So I'm not holding out much hope.
Well, that's
Yeah.
great then. Roll on Monday night,
So
and
yeah,
maybe
I mean,
the
great for
Spurs
you,
will
great for
come
you,
back and
because
review it.
looking at the league table, um, I mean, obviously you're 2 points ahead of Arsenal and City, 3 ahead of Liverpool. And if we quickly, briefly just touch on their fixtures to see what the table potentially could like going into that game
They'll
on
win
Monday
their
night.
games. We'll be fourth by the time
Well,
it
you
kicks off.
you would think City will win theirs. They're playing Bournemouth at home at the Etihad. Interesting one though is that Arsenal play Newcastle at St James's.
Hmm.
So I've and that's an evening kickoff on the Saturday night. I've got a feeling Newcastle are going to get something out of that against Arsenal. I just think with the atmosphere, St James's Park, and all that. So potentially, with you beating us there, I mean, you could be put in 6 points distance between yourselves, and Arsenal. And then City, you'd expect to win, and so you would still be top, edging ever closer to Christmas. So yeah.
Okay.
So if we can't, I mean, fixture wise, we'll look at who have you got after us on Monday? I know we touched on it in the last episode, but I can't remember now
I
who
can't
you've got
remember
after
myself.
that.
I'm just
I've,
thinking one game at a time.
yeah,
Get the Chelsea
I've
and
got
move
it
on.
here. I won't worry too much about it. Right, so you play Wolves away, and then
Oh,
Villa at home in your next 2 fixtures after Chelsea, um, with a month to go to Christmas. So yeah, I mean, I would think that both of those, well, hard to tell with Villa, but yeah, I'll expect you to beat Wolves. So I think this role could carry on for a fair few games.
I'm not even thinking about that. I'm thinking about nothing but Monday.
Right. So I think we've covered that then. So we're there,
That's
aren't
all,
we?
mate.
We are
Yeah.
there. I'm gonna go and get some sort of like heavy piece of metal ready for Monday night to start smacking myself about the head with. No doubt you'll be having a celebratory coffee come 11:30
Well, yeah.
Tuesday morning. And yeah, I don't go back to work until. Do you know what? Actually, where I work, there's a lot of Spurs fans, a lot of Spurs, a lot of West Ham, and a lot of Palace. And there's like a spattering of Chelsea fans. Thankfully, I'm on holiday from work, and I don't go back to work until Wednesday. So any stick that I might get from Spurs fans might have, the edge might have been tapered off of it a little bit before I get back to work on Wednesday. So we'll see. Anyway, we look forward to it. Nevertheless, I'll cheer my boys on through sun and rain, and we'll see what happens Monday night. You never know. Maybe I'll be eating my own humble Chelsea pie, and we can maybe put a little bit of a dent in Spurs season again. Live and
Right.
hope. Right, so that is season 4, episode 9, Talk Football Podcast. Thank you for watching myself and Paul ramble on all about our Chelsea Spurs rivalries, and obviously we'll have Paul on in a couple of weeks' time or so, hopefully, and we'll see where what the aftermath of this game is, and if it's had any kind of effect in the next couple of fixtures or so, particularly for Spurs or Chelsea, whether there's any kind of like fall off from either club or whatever after this match. So thank you, Paul, for joining me on this episode.
Right, mate.
And I'm going to go back to bed for an hour while all this downloads for me to sit and edit for the next like 3 hours or whatever. I got fireworks tonight. because obviously it's fireworks weekend in over here. I don't know if that's something you do over there in a particular way.
You don't hear them. They're not all going off in the background.
No, no, your noise suppression on your computer is very good.
Yeah, there aren't any public displays, but fireworks are on sale, so like people
This
do it.
weekend.
So
Yeah.
yeah, I can hear them all in the
All
background.
right. Okay. Hopefully, little Stella, Paul's dog. Hopefully, she's not affected too much by the fireworks. Fingers crossed for that. So yeah, that's that. Don't forget, if you want to get in contact with the show, uh, we are always looking for new people to come on and talk about their clubs, no matter what division, no matter what country you're from. So get in contact. The links are always on the bios of everything we've got, and that gets you to wherever you need to go for the podcast. So thank you for joining us on the Talk Football podcast, and we shall see you on the next episode.